Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm in the lovely city of Victoria on Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm with a man who's looking at developing a part of this land in a very different way. My guest is Joe Van Belleghem. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
Joe is a partner in windmill development, right?
Yep.
You've been a developer for a while, but you're not approaching it in the classic way. Why is that, and how did that happen?
Well, I've been a developer for about 18 years now, and about 8 years ago, I actually quit developing. I was making money, but I just didn't feel like the type of projects I was developing was really creating any value in my life or in the community I was in. And so I took a break, and fortunately for me, I got asked to be involved in a conversion of an old hospital into a high-tech park. And one of the things I did was said, let's build it as a green building.
Green, as a green building.
A green building.
What does that mean?
Well, a building that really addresses significant environmental issues like energy efficiency, water efficiency. How do you treat the site? How do you deal with stormwater? What kind of a protection of ecology you're doing? Indoor air quality, the type of materials used in the building, and addressing climate change issues. And
so what happened in that project?
Well, it was kind of interesting because the original reason for me to do it wasn't really holistic. It was really to get some free press and to distinguish the product in the marketplace.
Okay.
But fortunately for me, I read a book about a couple weeks after I decided to do it as a green building called Natural Capitalism by Paul Hawkins and Amory Lovins. And it was a real wake-up call for me because it talks about the value of our natural capital and how we as businessmen need to start looking to the environment for solutions on how we build our buildings, design our communities, and it really changed my life.
Really?
Yeah.
So you just sort of did a reversal on how you saw yourself and the opportunity you have as a developer.
Yeah, absolutely. It gave me a different viewpoint. The problem is that I went to university and studied in business and became a chartered accountant, and we never really looked or talked about the environment. And certainly when we did, it was from the perspective that being good to the environment was a cost of business. So, really do the minimal amount possible to avoid prosecution.
Which is a very different angle.
A different angle. So it just changed my perception of that there's so many solutions that the environment has to offer us that creates an economic wins.
That's a different, that is a reversal of things.
Yeah.
So where did that lead you? What are you working on now?
Well, what it led me was, once I understood the economics of green buildings, we formed a development company called Windmill, and we have projects across Canada, and our earlier projects are really standalone buildings. Okay. So we focused on, obviously, the LEED rating system and...
Let me go back to LEED. Which is a rating system for buildings on their sustainability or the green measures?
Yeah, on their environmental performance. It's a 69-point rating system developed by the United States Green Building Council, which has now been adopted by the Canada Green Building Council. And there's different levels that you can attain through a certification process. And but what we discovered in those earlier projects was that, sure, we're designing buildings that were energy and water efficient, but we realized that if we actually got involved in a larger scale, community scale, that we could actually benefit even more economically if we could pass on the savings from what we were doing in the building into the type of site infrastructure we're doing. So that led us to a larger scale project like Dockside Green. Now,
Dockside Green, tell us what this project is, and then we'll talk about who you partnered with and
yeah, well, it's a 15-acre site, a contaminated site, brownfield site. So we're cleaning it up. It's a mixed-use community, 1.3 million square feet of development on it, about 26 buildings. It's really, the focus behind it is really creating a triple bottom line development. So really designing the community so that it embraces economic, social, and environmental principles.
Okay, let's go back. The triple bottom line is economic, social, and environmental values or principles.
Principles, yeah.
Like, give me an example about that.
For instance, from an environmental perspective, what we're doing is we've committed to the city that all our buildings will be built to the LEED Platinum standard. And we
sounds pretty high.
Yeah, and we, there was some, obviously a few skeptics around that, so we backed it up with a potential penalty of $1 million to the city if we don't live up to our commitment. We're treating all our stormwater on site through a naturalized approach, so we're not using the city infrastructure.
Oh, really? So just stopping for a moment at that. So how are you treating your stormwater? What happens for that?
Well, one of the things we're doing is we're creating a naturalized creek and pond through the site, and we're using specific types of plants. So when it rains, the water hits our green roofs on our buildings. It gets cleaned and filtered and used there, and then the excess water goes through rain leaders into cisterns on the balcony that provides water to the planters. And then when it hits the ground, the water goes through open runnels into this creek and pond system and gets naturally treated.
With the plants that are in there and,
exactly.
and creatures, whatever.
Yeah. And what we wanted to do, our architects, our Busby, Perkin, Wills, and what we wanted to do was express how important water is through design. So that's why everything's open. So when it rains, you see how it flows through the site. So
it's nice. You just didn't put them in pipes and just disappear it for everybody.
Exactly.
Which actually keeps people in touch with the natural world here in your facilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important to promote urban ecology because we are becoming more urbanites, and we don't want to lose. Certainly don't want our children to lose that connection with nature. And from an economic perspective, it makes a lot of sense because what we found was those ground level units that are now on those creeks that don't have the ocean views ended up being one of our best selling units.
Interesting, because they have the water
feature
in front.
Yeah.
I want to go back for a second we'll get to the triple bottom line, but give us a picture of what these developments are like. You said mixed use. So how is that being structured in the buildings?
Well, we have we have residential on site. We have some office that'll be on site. We have some retail that'll be on site. We have some light industrial, and we're also adjacent to an industrial piece of land where they'll be doing a lot of marine vessel repairs. So it's in a very mixed-use setting. So there's opportunities, obviously, to live, work, and play in the same area. And then there's opportunities of the synergies between uses that start to happen. So, and then, the other things that we're doing are, we're treating 100% of our own sewage, and we're using the treated water for flushing toilets and irrigation.
So does that mean, if you're treating your own water, does that mean that you're plumbing separately for where you're flushing toilets versus drinking water? Yeah,
like our community right now doesn't treat sewage in Victoria.
Truly, I'm surprised.
Yes, and it's actually a hot topic, and there's a lot of support now for it to happen regionally, but it was a big issue when we made a proposal, and we just felt that we should do that. And it's turned out to be a smart decision because what happened for us was we were able to reduce the capital cost of sewage treatment by 50% by going in and spending more money on water efficient dishwashers and washing machines. We're using dual flush toilets and water efficient shower heads. So what that turned out happening was the residents are saving money, about $200,000 a year in water bills, and then the city waived the sewage charges because we're treating our own sewage. So the residents are actually going to make money off sewage because the savings from them exceeds the cost of operating the plant. So it not only is good for the environment, it's turned out to be a good economic
So here
situation.
you are looking at a really good example of that triple bottom line.
Yeah.
That's not just for you. Savings not just accrued for you as developers, but for the people who are living there.
Yeah, exactly. And not just the people that are living there. You have to start to, like, one of the things about green buildings is the impacts it can have regionally. Like, we'll save about 70 million gallons of water a year, which is equivalent to the entire region's water use on the driest day of the year.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And if you look at regionally, we're looking at treating sewage. They're saying in 23 years, assuming climate change isn't happening, that we're going to have to tap into the Leach River and spend $100 million to clean it up. Now, we're saying if you actually treat water as a precious resource, we don't have to spend that money, I don't believe, and that would save us money as taxpayers.
So you're doing other things. What else are you doing in the design of the structures to save resources and environment?
Well, I think one of the key things is obviously energy efficiency as well. I mean, water efficiency we talked about, we're saving about 65% less water than a normal development. But from a water energy perspective, what we're doing is, first of all, concentrating on passivity. So really understanding the building and how the sun relates to it. So we're putting in good glazing system, low E glazing, good installation, using exterior shading devices. So we've been able to lower the energy use in our buildings from about 54% less than the model energy code. And then what we're doing now is we're also going to be putting in every individual suite, individual meters. So people will have, they'll know how much hot water they're using, how much cold water, how much heat, and how much electricity.
Nice.
And they'll be able to compare that use to previous years and also give them more control. And then the other thing we're currently working on is we're just looking at the business case of providing a district heating system on site using biomass. It's a company called Nextera, a BC company. And if we can pull that off, we'll actually be greenhouse gas positive from an energy perspective.
Congratulations on that, if that happens.
Yeah.
Now, tell us how that might work.
Well, what it would be is basically you're using waste wood and it gets gasified, and then the gas gets burned to produce hot water.
Okay.
And we would, one of the things that's happened to us is we got so good at our design of our buildings that they're using less heat. So that means with the system that we're planning, we'll have heat to sell. So the idea would sell excess heat off-site as well.
So let me figure this out. So you're using surplus wood or wood chips or whatever from your surrounding environment,
yes.
right? Gasifying it, which then heats hot water, so that the hot water that's piped into all of the units comes from that source, and you have extra left over
to be able to sell,
to sell off to nearby other buildings, which means you have to pipe it to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And what's really exciting about that is that you know, the traditional heating source in BC is electric baseboard heating for residential.
Okay. Right.
And the same with domestic hot water, which is just a crazy thing to do because particularly with the heating is you have to, BC Hydro has to design for capacity for something that only gets used for 2 months of the year. So we approached Hydro, and Hydro is very innovative, and we said, why don't we work together and why don't we eliminate electric baseboard heating and go to hydronic heating? And so they're now working with us on developing an incentive program that will escalate based on the amount of energy efficiency that we're able to save in the buildings.
So how does that incentive work?
Well, for the incentive would, if we go from 50 to 60 to 70 to 80% energy efficient, the incentive goes up. And what we have to agree to do is provide individual meters in every suite, and we have to agree to eliminate electric baseboard heating.
Which you're doing in your design.
Which we're doing in the design. So it's a win-win for them because they actually save money because the incentive is less what the cost of new supply is.
Sure.
And it's a win for us because the incentive allows us to then invest in greater energy efficiency. And so the other thing we're doing is really, well, the two other big things I would say is really focusing on health and well-being. And you know, if you look at most condo designs, what they do is they take air and they put it in your corridor and hope it seeps under your door to get some air, and it's just crazy. So, you know, asthma's on the rise in kids.
Yes.
So we're bringing in 100% fresh air to every suite, and as that air circulates out, we recover the heat and pre-warm the air coming in. So we save energy that way while giving suites 100% fresh air, and then we don't use urea formaldehyde, so we use, for instance, wheat board in our cabinets, and we're specifying glues and paints and adhesives that are either have no volatile organic compounds or very little in it to really focus on health and well-being. And then materials, you know, really trying to, you know, our focus is really threefold there. Is trying to support those companies that are in sustainability. For instance, we're using Interface's Cool Climate carpet tile in our buildings. This flooring you're standing on right now is actually a local company called Triton, goes and harvests old growth trees that have been flooded over in water reservoirs. And they go in and they cut the trees underwater and they float them up. And
interesting.
We're going to be using that wood in our development. And, you know, we use things like fly ash in our concrete and a lot of recycled materials, and really trying to, you know, pick products that have less of an ecological impact, and as well as support those companies that are trying to create
to help
change.
them, which is what they need. They
Yeah,
need to
what
have
they
that
need.
support. So
Yeah.
you're supporting each other. I also know that you're trying to put in really efficient appliances
Yeah.
and compact fluorescent lighting and wherever you can save.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
way.
And again, one of the things that we're discovering is when we invested in water efficient appliances and water efficient shower heads, that reduced the cost of our sewage treatment, but then it also resulted in a lot less hot water being used, which then saved energy. So, and
They
it
all
starts,
tie together,
it ties
right?
together.
Well,
And then you got to, we also spent a lot of time analyzing where to put the sewage treatment plant to reduce, so we didn't need to pump stuff, So, and a lot of that came from natural capitalism because, there's that whole concept that waste is food. So I hate waste.
yeah.
So I look for wherever there's waste, and then we try to find solutions
And
to
waste
eliminate
is
it.
food for the next process. Like your
Absolutely.
saved water is also saved heat because you're using less of it.
Absolutely,
Nice.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
What has it been like working to get, this development, has it been an easy thing in terms of your building codes or working with your city? You talked about working with the city on
Well,
the sewage and other things. What was that like?
Well, it was actually a very unique process because the land was originally owned by the city of Victoria, and they asked for proposals from developers, and they had quite a few developers respond to it. But what the city did is they said, we're going to sell this land, but we're going to sell it for the best value. And when they said the best value, they didn't mean price. What they did is they created a 300-point rating system. And you had 100 points for economic issues, 100 points for social issues, and 100 points for environmental issues.
Which says to me that the city of Victoria is already thinking ahead of many cities in terms of the triple bottom line.
And of course, there was those that said, well, no, we should be trying to get the best price. But what they also had a minimum price that you had to give the city. But what happened was, we partnered up with Van City, which is a large credit union, and we both had that sort of basic core values around the triple bottom line. So we were able to use our experiences together to really give them a triple bottom line response. So when we presented our RFP to council, we got a standing ovation from the community. And we were chosen as the successful developers, and we were able to rezone the entire 1.3 million square feet in 8 months, which is unheard of.
It sounds like close to a miracle. It sounds like you're doing the right thing,
well,
actually,
yeah,
as far as the community is concerned.
We literally did not have anybody oppose it. And, we had the environmental community, the business community, and the local community association. In fact, the local community association has been really partners of ours in the design, and I credit them with a lot of the success of our development because they've come up with some really good ideas to improve the development, which has improved the marketability as well.
So it sounds like you haven't developed your design for this in isolation.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, the community has been very active in the design of the master plan as well as every building. And again, that makes sense, not just to build support, but what we're finding is that the community, they live there. They know what works.
That's
and
right.
And they've come up with some good ideas. And in fact, our current phase that we're selling now, they actually recommended that we get 2 more floors of height so that we could open viewscapes and create some townhouses along the street level, which improves the livability, and from a marketing perspective is better for us to have higher buildings, obviously.
For sure. Yeah. Which came from your community,
Yeah,
interestingly.
from the community, yeah.
Well, it sounds to me that you're working on a model here of not, what would I call it? Business as usual for developer would be come in, develop your buildings, go away, and not live with what you've set in motion. And you are working both with, if you're working with a social bottom line, you're also going to be looking at how do we make people's lives better. Certainly something that we would have to consider is this a little walkable region? Are the stores, the retail things going to serve the needs of folks so they don't have to get in their cars or drive or transit? Tell me a little bit about those ideas.
Well, one of the things, certainly from a retail, we're focusing on is value-based businesses. Right now we're negotiating with a really cool organic bakery that's going to use local grains in the region.
Nice.
So that's something. But we also, a big part of sustainability is really getting people out of the automobile.
Yeah.
And so we have a we're buying 10 smart cars and electric vehicles for a car share. We're purchasing a little mini transit bus. We're working with BC Transit. We have 10,000. We have a bicycle trail that goes through the site that services over 10,000 users a year. So we're upgrading that. We're buying free bikes, subsidizing transit passes, and subsidizing car share for the affordable housing units that we're building on site as well.
Okay.
So really trying to promote alternative transportation too, again, to reduce reliance on the vehicles.
Well, you're in walking distance, I mean, of some
Downtown,
shopping or
yeah.
shuttle distance,
Yeah.
and those things will help. What, I'm trying to think of here. You just mentioned the affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that's mandated by your community here. What portion of your...
No, it wasn't mandated.
Really?
It was actually something we proposed. In fact, the evaluation didn't give a lot of points for affordable housing, but what we've done is we've mandated a $3 million fund that we've put up, and the city actually is contributing 20% of the building permit fees they collect to the fund. And we'll access that fund to buy down some of the units. So the units on site, there's two approaches we're taking. For instance, in our first two buildings, the affordable housing units are about 10% of them are integrated in with the high-end market units in the same buildings. And then we'll build some standalone frame buildings. You know, and again, if you're building a community, you got to have a mixture of incomes and ages. And the interesting thing we're finding is we did some surveys of our buyers, and we're not targeting a certain segment. You know,
Really?
No, our buyers in our first phase we had 20-year-olds and 30 and 40, 50, we even had 70-year-olds buy. And we asked them, you know, what was attracting you to this development? And they all talked about community. And it really wasn't about the building. I mean, the buildings are obviously very well designed and livable and focusing on the environment, but what really got them was this whole comprehensive community, like that they're part of something that's really trying to address you know, sustainability in a meaningful way.
Are there ways that you think that this kind of development that you're planning help promote that social network, that social community?
Yeah, well, I think you know, we're creating a community liaison group on site, which will build relationships between various groups. So that'll help guide us through the development. But when we leave, that they'll you know, still be in place. We're trying to create a sustainability center on site. I really would like to have you know, we're talking to the Sierra Club about them moving into it, because I'd like to see the environmental groups that are doing great work in our community be in a building that espouses their values, and also work together and educate our youth. Because I mean, I think it's important that we really educate our youth around the environment. And so we're working with that. I'm also very excited about our work with the First Nations people. You know, it was interesting. We had a meeting with the well, I can remember somebody from Van City called me and said, have you talked to the First Nations people? And I fortunately slipped into my traditional developers thinking and say, why would I talk to them? I mean, the reality is that, you know, a long time ago, we took this land away from them and contaminated it. And I was in the middle of a rezoning process, and I didn't want to upset the apple cart. But that night, somebody from Van City sent me pictures of when their children the day they were asked to leave the land, and it kind of shook me up. And so we called a meeting, and one of the chiefs showed up, and you know, we came prepared, and we told them that we were going to give them money for historical signage, and we're doing a construction training program to use First Nations. But even in the middle of that discussion, I turned to the chief and said, you know, I really don't know what you need. I'm a white guy, you know, and the reality is we contaminated this land. How about you help us heal it? And about 3 weeks later, we had 8 First Nations chiefs out and their children out, and we did a sort of blessing ceremony, and we gave our pledge to the children to be responsible to the stewards of the land. And I really think that's going to result in a really meaningful relationship, because it's an enormous social opportunity, I think, for the development. So I really hope we continue to build on that relationship too.
Joe, goosebumps. That's really beautiful to be including them back in the circle here. We've got about 2 minutes left. I don't know what we haven't touched on, but I'd want to ask you how you feel. You read Natural Capitalism. You moved off into a new direction with your community. How does this touch you now?
Well, I mean, I enjoy what I do. I don't consider what I do work. I'm, you know, fairly optimistic about our future. I took my children to watch Al Gore's movie the other day, and they came out and they were very, you know, kind of upset and discouraged. And I said, you know, don't look at it that way. This is an enormous opportunity for you, you know, because we're really seeing that what we're doing is affecting change. And there's a lot of people out there doing great work, you know, in the United States Green Building Council in Canada. And I just think if we all start working together, we can beat this climate change issue. I'm convinced of it. And I think we can turn it into an enormous economic opportunity. It's just we got to work together and we all got to do our part.
Well, I think that message of all of us working together, and I think that keeping track of all three bottom lines, and the fact that we are everything is connected, just as you're finding in your design work, and your people are connected. I think that how we deal with our urban areas are critical.
Absolutely, and I think the issue around the triple bottom line is people think that the triple bottom line is if you make money, then you have money to be able to invest in social and environmental good. And if you come from that perspective, you won't be effective. And I think, you know, the lesson I learned when I was writing the RFP was they wanted us to write all our economic, social, environmental, and I kept repeating myself. And I remember talking to Ray Cole, a professor at UBC, and he said, Joe, he says, that's because you're having so much problems because you're finally starting to understand the triple bottom line. It's about designing techniques in your community that embrace all three.
Great.
And funny thing happens. The economics get stronger.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wish you well, and thank you for being a model for building in a wonderful way, many levels.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
You're watching Peak Moment, Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Join me next time.